Welcome to School Life Unpacked, the podcast for anyone navigating the complexities of their child's education. Join me, Natasha Curtis-Ego, and a lineup of insightful guests as we explore the challenges, joys, and surprises of school life, offering support and tips to help us feel more confident and connected. Today, I'm so excited to have a guest with us who I will let her introduce herself and then we'll get straight into our conversation.
Hi, I'm Lauren, a local primary school teacher. I'm also the co-founder of a local small charity called the South End Care Bank. I've been teaching coming up to 12 years now, so 11, 12 years.
What made you want to be a teacher?
I wanted to be a film historian, and then I decided I wanted to go into further education and share my love of film history and film theory, and that didn't quite work out. So I went and volunteered at a local primary school in Walthamstow, long time ago, and within minutes I was just like, oh, I love this. I love it. This is exactly what I want to do. Funny thing is, it was a year one class, and I thought, that's it. I want to be a Key Stage 1 teacher. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then when I actually started teaching, I was like, never want to step foot in another year one classroom ever again.
Oh, no.
No, I'm sure now I've got more experience, but it's a whole different experience to what I'm used to up at Key Stage 2. So, I think we all have different skills and different strengths.
And yours is in Key Stage 2?
Yes, definitely.
With new parents, could you explain what the Key Stage 1 and the Key Stage 2 are?
So you've got the early years foundation stages, which is nursery and reception. Those are, reception is age 4 to 5. Then you've got Key Stage 1, which is year 1 and 2, where children are kind of engaging in slightly more formal learning to read and write, hopefully still through an element of play. And then at the end of Key Stage 2, I guess in the olden days when I was a kid, it was infant school. So reception year 1 and year 2 would be infants. It's now Key Stage 1. And then you've got Key Stage 2, which is year 3, 4, 5 and 6. To the olden days would have been junior school. And you've got lower Key Stage 2, year 3 and 4, upper Key Stage 2, which is 5 and 6.
I didn't realise that Key Stage 2 is actually divided into 2 sections.
Yeah, quite informally though.
Oh, okay.
Informally.
Do you find that transitioning the children throughout how do you manage that? Because I've noticed from nursery to reception, it's quite a change for them. My daughter is now going from year 3 to year 4 and is in panic mode because she doesn't want to leave. She has this every year. I don't want to leave my class. I don't want to leave my teacher. So how, as a teacher, do you manage that transition?
The transitions are managed quite carefully. The children are given an opportunity to meet their new teacher, spend a morning or a couple of hours with them. And then for the remaining school year, the current teacher will identify children that will struggle with that transition and recommend kind of extra sessions, or that those slightly more anxious children will then seek out their new teacher in the playground and at break times to kind of start building that relationship. Something I do has always helped was with my new class, I send them a letter. So on the transition day, I create a double-sided letter. On one side, it's all about me with a photo of me and what I like, what I don't like, my favourite book. And I put a QR code to a YouTube video of my favourite kids book and watch this and we can talk about it in September and all this information. And then on the other side, they like a blank version for themselves. So if they want to bring it back to me, they can, so I can get to know them better. And I hand it to them in a sealed envelope on the transition day and they absolutely love it. Gets really excited. It's like personal mail. And then they feel like they know me come September.
Oh, that's really lovely. I've not heard that before. That's really a really beautiful way to build a bond before you even sort of sit down together. Yeah, formally.
I started doing it during COVID, during the lockdown, because we couldn't actually have proper transitions with our classes. I was on maternity leave for the first transition year, and then the following year, 2021, there were still a lot of restrictions around mixing bubbles. So I started with that year, and I've just continued since because it's been so effective.
So what has been the most interesting about me thing that you've read from a student?
They love to tell me how many siblings they've got.
Well, family is important, so
they do. They love to pictures of their cats, pictures of their dogs, sports they do. I don't think I've ever been told anything particularly juicy or exciting. It's pretty sad. Yeah, what's important to kids, what their favourite toys are, what their favourite movies are,
With parents helping support their child through that little change, what would be your little advice for helping the first sort of transition point? Like, how do you calm that anxiety? Because I find I'm saying the same thing every year. I'm like, don't worry, you'll still see your old teacher, you're still in the same school, and it's exciting to move forward and learn a little bit more. You're going to meet somebody new, maybe make some new friends.
I think those feelings are so natural and they're so common. And I think you just got to validate. Yes, this is hard. It is really hard. Change is hard, but provide tangible tools, kind of mindfulness, journaling, drawing how they're feeling and listening, trivialising, not minimising. I think it's so important that children are heard. And we know that 5 minutes with any teacher, they aren't going to think twice. I mean, every teacher will tell you that when their old class comes to you kind of mid-September, goes, oh my God, my new teacher's like the best teacher ever. That's a stab in the heart. Like, oh, I was the best teacher ever. But it's, they do move on quick. Children can be very fickle little things, but we don't tell them that. We don't minimize that. We don't trivialize that. It's this is hard. Yes. And maybe relate to them through an experience where you found transitional change hard yourself. There's loads of storybooks out there. Picture books are a great way of helping children process tricky feelings around transition.
Because it seems to be that's the biggest thing. And I think I always wonder, is this a COVID thing that we've identified it more? Or is this always been a thing where we've noticed the children struggle with the transition? What would be your opinion on that?
I think it's always been there. I think COVID allowed us to tap into children's emotional well-being and be a little bit more conscious of those struggles they might face. So it might be that we are now noticing things a bit more. We are also aware, so teachers have always been aware. So for example, you have a small number of children in your class, perhaps neurodivergent children who always struggle with transition. So those things were always put into place every July, social stories and additional transition meetings and time with their new teacher. But as the years have gone by, particularly recently, we're a little bit more aware that actually most children struggle with this. And we've become a lot more conscious of neurodivergency showing up in lots of different ways. And actually what we've learned is what works for one, what works for neurodivergent children works for all children. So it might be that children are feeling more comfortable expressing themselves a little bit more, the way we're adapting our teaching, which opens up opportunities for children to express themselves a little bit more clearly. Some people call it unmasking, so that there might be children that are feeling more comfortable and more confident expressing those big tricky feelings and expressing their needs a little bit clearer now.
Which is great. I think that's the one thing that is really wonderful to see, is that schools are becoming more aware of our mental health and also of how diverse we are. We're so different as individuals, but schools are now seeing it and identifying it and bringing that into the forefront of their teaching, and not one mold fits all. It's sort of allowing for that diversity in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, all schools are completely different. So they deal with that transition in different ways, but I definitely think there's been a change in recent times in that understanding of different needs and what each different child would benefit from.
How do you adapt in your class to meet? You mentioned neurodiversity and that being more, I guess it's more mainstream now. Now we're identifying it a lot quicker, and we're helping children and we're supporting them more. How do you find that in your classroom, and how are you able to support neurodivergence?
It has to be it has to be embedded in your practice. Okay. I was really lucky to work at school for the first 9 years of my career that was a fully inclusive school, and we had fantastic training as well. And now I make sure that my practice is as up to date and as research backed as possible. And I understand that, again, what works for neurodivergent children or children struggling with their mental health works for every child in the room. And it's always a work in practice. One adult with one exhausted LSA who has been pulled in 1,000 directions cannot meet the needs of 30 individual children. I'm not even going to pretend we can, but we do our best. But there are so many different things. So my keyword is, even though I'm quite a highly strung neurotic person myself, my keyword in my classroom is calm. Calm, routine, structure. My children know exactly where they're going to be at all times and what's going to happen. So we have visual timetables. The children that might struggle with anxiety have individual timetables Velcro to their desks. We have emotional check-in boards and growth mindset boards on the laminated and taped to the tables. So I equip them with language to describe their feelings. And we don't just talk about what those feelings are. We talk about how they show up in our bodies, our faces, how to identify them in different people, how they show up in different people as well. One person might act this way, one person might act that way. I teach them about their kind of brain. So literally the kind of how their brain is made up in a very, very basic way, because I am not a neuroscientist, but I use the work of Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne, their book, The Whole Brain Child, absolutely incredible. And it has given me language, which I then pass on to children. And I've had 7-year-olds explain to their parents. oh, I reacted in that way because my amygdala has detected a threat and it thinks I'm in danger, but I know I'm not in danger.
Oh, wow. But I want to be in your class. I feel like I could learn some stuff.
And so I'm always talking or and I'm like, oh, perhaps you reacted like that because actually when I called your name, the ancient part of your brain thought there was a saber-toothed tiger at the door, when actually it was just me catching you out for daydreaming. And they were like, oh, I'm not actually going to die. So I give them language. I look at the kind of the physical need, try to offer flexible seating depending on the size of the room, bean bags, laptop tables. I've got a rug on the floor, resistance bands attached to chairs, wobble boards, just trying to look at what tangible, even a small difference could that child, it's not going to solve their problems. But in the meantime, I try and incorporate movement into my lessons, whether it is just kind of walking around the room, whether we agree or disagree with something, getting up and walking to different sides of the room. My children, I've got a group of children that have regular access to the gym outside for movement breaks. Just there's lots and lots of different ways. It's not a one size fits all at all. It really isn't. It's just looking at what that child needs, but also what you can do within the parameters of the classroom.
Yeah, because that child isn't in a class one-to-one with you.
No.
You have so many other children and they need your support just as much. So it's sort of a holistic whole class kind of approach but tailoring small bits to each little child.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds really inclusive and supportive, which is amazing.
I think the word inclusive gets overused a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think what I aim for, because inclusion, if you ask anyone what inclusion means, it's included, having someone included. But actually, there's a big difference between inclusion and belonging. Okay. And included means you're there.
Yeah.
You're there. Mm-hmm. You've been thought about.
Yes.
And maybe perhaps your needs have been catered to. But actually what I aim to create, and I hope I do, is a sense of belonging in the classroom. A place where every child feels safe, where they know they are not just physically safe, but psychologically safe, where they know that they can be their truest, fullest self. So whether they are neurodivergent, whether they are Black or disabled or queer, they know that when they come into my classroom, they belong. And that, to me, is far more important than inclusion.
So do you think sometimes our language is almost prehistoric in some ways, that we use a lot of terms, but we use them incorrectly without understanding their real meaning? A little bit, like some terms.
But I think, no, because I think inclusion is still a really important word, particularly to children, because children understand it. So, but I think language is important. It's hugely important, but we can get caught up on it, So I think for some teachers that are perhaps early on in their journey to kind of create, a safe, warm, inclusive classroom, that word is absolutely fine. It's that as we get further along in our journey and we kind of dig a little deeper into our practice, we start to understand the power of words. And to me, it's not like, I don't say to the children, we've got a belonging classroom. It's like, I want this classroom to be inclusive. I want everyone to feel safe here. It's that word is for me. It's what kind of underpins my values, belonging.
Do you feel, going back into your childhood, did you feel that way at primary school? Did you feel that you belonged in your classroom?
No. So I grew up in a white middle class area. I'm white. We grew up working class in East London, moved to a white middle class area in Essex, in the great East London exodus of the 80s. And for all intents and purposes, I fit in. I look like I fit in. Blonde hair, blue eyes, it was fine. But my dad had died when I was 4. So I was in reception. My dad had died. And my stepdad, who had been around since I was a baby, so my mum and dad hadn't stayed together. My stepdad had been involved in my life since the very beginning. Very much a second father figure to me, and then became my father figure after my dad died. He was actually in and out of prison for my entire childhood. And this was actually a secret that I kept all through primary and secondary school. So I carried a lot of shame with me. We're talking about going to school through the year of the 80s and 90s, where every storybook, every textbook, everything was white, middle class, patriarchal, every family that was represented in storybooks. And I didn't have any words for that because I always grew up with this feeling of, well, I'm okay. Like, we've got a house. I'm fine. Like, when people would try and express sympathy for me, I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm fine. I know I'm okay because other people have it worse than me. I always knew that. And so I wouldn't allow myself to feel sorry for myself. And it wasn't until I got much older, actually, it was like, no, that I may not have as a child, I may not have had a visible difference, that the oppression I experienced wasn't tangible, it wasn't visible,
Yeah.
but actually that shame that I'd carried. And what happened was I became an overachiever. I always joke that I was basically Hermione Granger in primary school. Like, my mum couldn't keep up with me. The books she'd buy me, she'd come to me to edit her letters. I'd check all her grammar. I was a massive overachiever, but I didn't know how to engage with my emotions at all. I was what my mum would call a very dramatic child. I would have these great big outbursts. And then as I became a teenager, I learned to like just tuck them away. And then they'd come out in huge bursts of what were dismissed at the time as teenage angst.
Yeah.
I hated secondary school. I went to a grammar school, hated it. Just stopped. I just gave up. Year 8, I just gave up. Just, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I got by on the bare minimum, copying homework first thing in the morning from anyone that let me copy from them, late coursework. They sent me to the school counsellor. You're just very sad, aren't you? I'd be like, no, I'm angry. I'm just angry at everyone. And then it wasn't until I became a primary school teacher at 30. So I did my teacher training at 30, and I had some training around growth mindset. We were really lucky to have a bit of an expert in his field, Dr. Barry Heimer, come and do our teacher training. And then he came to my school and kind of taught all the staff about it. And I had this epiphany. I said to him, so when I gave up, I thought I was giving up because I couldn't do the work that I'd always found easy. And he said, no, you were giving up because it was on your terms. You knew that if you failed, you were in control of that. That was in your control. And you could say that I did that. I chose to fail because you didn't feel psychologically safe enough to fail through trying. And to me, it was like,
wow,
literally light bulbs. And I remember like welling up and just being like, oh my God, my entire education, kind of secondary education, was formed by that fixed, what we now call a fixed mindset, and then learning about Carol Dweck's work. So I first and foremost kind of became a growth mindset teacher. I was just like, I cannot let another child grow up with that mindset. And interestingly enough, it's actually the overachievers, the kids that find learning quite easy, that are more likely to have a fixed mindset because they don't feel psychologically safe enough to take risks and to fail. Right. So yeah, that kind of shaped my
it's really interesting. Yeah. It's like, so now you've infused that into your year. You said you're a year 6 teacher.
I'm a year 6 teacher,
so a shame you're not slightly earlier to break that little thing, but amazing that you're just before secondary school. So at least they're stepping forward with more confidence.
Yeah. And I think it goes hand in hand with taking care of, helping them build their emotional literacy and giving them those tools and knowing that actually when we fail, this is how we might feel inside. So what tools have we got? And when we're scared of failing, what's going on in our brains, what's going on in our bodies, and how can we respond to those emotions rather than react to those emotions? It all goes hand in hand. And I know that a lot of people will say, well, children need to be more resilient. And resilience is an important tool to have, but we don't want children to become hardened. So it's building that resilience, but not in the face of them not being able to feel their feelings and acknowledge their feelings and talk about their feelings.
I think children need to understand their feelings before they can become resilient. Yes. Because if you don't know why you're feeling a feeling, how do you know to recover from it? Yeah. How do you know that feeling in that moment is the worst feeling? But it's okay because once I've dealt with it, I can move. Yeah. But if you don't know that, and I think a lot of parents don't have the tools to be able to help their children build that resilience in that kind of framing because we weren't taught it.
No.
We were taught to, you fall down, you get up, dust yourself off and carry on. And, it's okay. It'll pass. It's fine. You'll
get over it.
Yeah,
it's not a big deal.
Yeah, she's not talking to you today, but it'll be fine
in
tomorrow.
That moment, it's the biggest deal in the world.
Absolutely.
And acknowledging that with kids, when they've had a falling out with their friends.
Yeah.
Oh, that must feel really hard. I know how that feels. Yeah. But something I always teach to children, that something I learned from The Whole Brain Child, the book, is your feelings are a temporary state, not a permanent trait. And we always say that. We say that to the children. They are what you're feeling now. They are something you have right now. They are not who you are forever. And we joke about it being like going on a bear hunt. Every child knows that. It's like we can't go over it, we can't go under it. We have to go through them. We can't go around them. We've got to go through these sticky feelings. We've got to experience them, welcome them in, and they will go when they're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And in fact, when my kids were little, I used to read that to them and say, oh, this is so true of life. And these little babies look at me like, yeah, you're crazy. But for me, it resonated that in life, we have to go through everything to get out to the other side, because going under it, going over it, it's still going to come back.
Yeah.
And
And I learned that, looking back as a child, I was taught to hide a lot, push down a lot of feelings, hide parts of me because they could be hidden. Because like I said, things that I was experiencing weren't visible. So I could hide them. And it was only as an adult. And I look around the classroom and I'm like, actually, we need to acknowledge that these children are complete human beings in this moment. They're not future adults. They're not tiny little vessels for me to fill up with knowledge. They are complete human beings with their own stories and lives and feelings. And we need to validate that and see them for who they are.
How do you get that teaching that goes in the classroom to be sort of pushed out to home so parents can support in a similar manner? Because great you're doing in the classroom, when they go home and mum's like, oh, don't worry about it, just get on with it, keep going. How do you have like an open dialogue with your parents?
It's harder with the older children, but it's just as important. So if you do have listeners with year 5, year 6 children, it is just as important to stay in contact with their teachers. See if you can pick them up once a week and have a chat, check in with them. The school I work at, we use Class Dojo. So I make sure there's posts up there weekly. I always reassure parents they can contact me on there anytime they like. Different teachers have different boundaries around these things.
Yes.
It's really important to understand. Whereas I am very open to communication because it's so important. It's so important for the parents to know that you are on their child's side, like you are there for their child and you have their child's best interests at the centre of everything you do. It's also important for the child to know that you and their parent or their grown up are on the same, that we're on your side. We are here to support you.
Yeah.
So I just think maintaining that communication, making sure you are going to every parents' evenings meeting available, making sure that, you maintain that communication and you ask your child. So, for example, I will put things up on Class Dojo connected to what we have learned, or I will say ask your child about what mindfulness strategies they learned today. Ask your child about what we discussed in our reading lesson because something big might have come up that relates to them. So what I used to do as well was a Thinking Friday question in class. We'd always have a philosophical question. It was a year 3 class and they loved it. And I'd always put that on Class Dojo as well. Every Friday, this is our question. Talk to your children about it. Ask your child. And so the children could then take what they'd been discussing in the class and take it home with them. Yeah. So there's just little things like that. But I would say it's all down to communication.
And
showing an interest.
I think parents do try, but sometimes you get children who shut down a little bit and it's trying to reopen that door. I think when they're in reception in year 1, they kind of want to tell you everything. And as they get older, I guess, as they become more self-aware, they start shutting down a little bit and it's trying to tease out. And if you're able to have that open communication with the teacher, at least you can also sort of have a starting point and be like, oh, I was speaking to a teacher. She mentioned this or he mentioned that. And you can sort of try and get that conversation back up and running. And I wonder if it's children, sometimes they want to be a problem, just as older parents, when they get old, they don't want to be a burden. I get this impression that children go through that stage of not wanting to be disruptive or not wanting to, not all children, just not wanting to be so vocal about what's going on. And maybe they've been shut down in the past when you've been busy and not been able to, listen with an open ear and that kind of, so it's nice to sort of see they are supported at school and to see that the strategies can be used at home as well to open them up.
Yeah.
Again, you mentioned before that you have a small charity. I know I'm bouncing about, but I wanted to ask about it because I think it plays nicely into knowing your classroom, knowing the support needed in your community and having that conversation with parents as well. So could you tell us a little bit about your charity and what made you sort of find it and where the idea came from?
Yeah, so we were running for 4.5 years. We opened our doors December 2020. Before that, I had run a period poverty fundraiser on my own a couple of years before that. And I remember thinking, one, this is an important cause, really, really important cause to my heart. And I'd done quite well, but I was thinking, oh God, if I had other people to do this with, this could have been amazing. And a friend had said to me at the time, oh, I could just see you starting your own charity. This is clearly something you love. And I was like, no, don't, that's silly. And before that as well, during those years, I'd run a girl empowerment group at school and we'd done our yearly food bank collections and we would do a food bank drive throughout the school and we would then gather it all up and we'd go and deliver it to the local food bank in Tower Hamlets and the girls would then spend some time at the food bank, getting to know the people, hearing about what they do. So I'd always kind of tried to make it part of my teaching practice, but also what I did with my own time, because I believe that when we have kind of privilege, whether it's time, money, access to certain spaces, access to certain people, our responsibility is to use it like currency and to spend it as much as we can. And so I'd moved to Southend. I didn't really have a big kind of circle of friends to talk about things that were important to me, the political landscape, kind of violence against women. I was itching to do something for my community, but I didn't have a community. And then at the beginning of 2020, I kind of pulled together a group of local feminists, and we were talking about how we could support our community. And there were lots of big ideas. No one really knew how to implement it. And then lockdown started. And just before lockdown, we'd done a collection at an art gallery for International Women's Day. And we'd collected period products, maternity pads for our local food bank. And it went really well. And lots of people were really interested in supporting it. And then lockdown happened. And all of a sudden, loads of people were getting in touch with me going, oh, can I drop nappies to you? Can I drop this to you? Can I, basically seeing me as a kind of a central person who could then drop it to their own food bank, to the food bank, without realising they could do it themselves. So that kind of happened. And then I was really inspired by the work the Red Box Project were doing around period poverty. They don't exist anymore because of the government scheme of providing schools with period products. But they would put red plastic boxes in local areas, libraries, shops, chemists, and collect period products and deliver them to schools because of the figures that had been released in the years previous around young girls that weren't accessing school because of periods and not being able to afford appropriate products. And so I was like, oh, what if? It was one of these things. We were going round and round and round. We put these boxes in public places and people put hygiene products in. It was just... And then I had visited one of the local food banks around this time and they were like, we'll show you round. So they took me kind of into their storage unit and they showed me this one shelf amongst the whole huge room. They were like, oh, that there are hygiene products. We can't keep it stocked because there's such a high demand. But obviously food is more important. We can only give over one shelf. We can't keep it stocked quick enough. And it made me realise that, we'd seen the figures, but I was seeing this in real life, that people were really actually having to make the decision to eat or to be clean. And people weren't thinking of donating hygiene products to the food bank either. They were donating bags of pasta, bags of rice. They weren't thinking about shower gel and toothpaste and deodorant, the things that are integral to our dignity and our mental well-being and our ability to access public spaces as well. So again, we were just having conversations and these went on for months. And I have a lovely friend who had access to the church hall because she was running the breastfeeding group I was going to with my baby. And it all became quite informal at first. We posted an Amazon wish list on Instagram and a PayPal link and said, this is what we're going to do. And it was lockdown. We put a trestle table at the church hall doors and people were just sending it to my house, like it was a box of nappies, baby wipe, shower gel. And we just stacked it up in the church hall, masked up. I had my baby strapped to my back in a sling and we were just whatever we had, we were handing out. There was no structure to it. No, none of us had ever done this. It was me and two other people the first session and we'd never done anything like it. And it's all been trial and error. Now 4.5 years later, we are an official charity. We serve over 100 people a month. So we're supporting over 100 local families every month. And there's a lot more structure to the way we run now.
Well, no, I witnessed, so a couple of weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago, I came to the library and I just saw this huge queue. So we're at Westcliff Library and I see this really long queue and I'm thinking, what have I missed? What's happening? And the man who was in charge of the library said, oh no, we've got Southend Care Bank here today. I was just shocked at the need.
Yeah.
And that's what I hadn't realised because like you said, when they say donate to your food bank, what do you think of? You think of food because that's what they're asking for. It's a food bank.
Yeah.
You never think of the hygiene products.
No.
And just to see all these families queuing and so grateful to be able to access this. And I realised that it's so needed. Yeah. These families having children who go to school.
Yes.
And the children feeling like they don't have enough, but at least there's this support. But like just that having to grow up feeling, deprived in a way, but not being able to express that at school because you don't want your friends to know your family's going through all that. And then as you start going through puberty, it's just this whole roller coaster of thoughts started hitting me. And I realized, like you said, that it's such a big need and no one's addressing it. Well, you are now, but no one's, really, it hasn't been addressed as much.
No, it hasn't. And when you think that most food banks are referral based, so there are quite a lot of people that won't meet that threshold of need. There's the stigma around seeking out a food bank referral as well. So some people might be not doing that through their own feelings around that. And also, if you are only given a certain amount of items or allowed to take a certain amount of items, are you going to choose baby wipes or nappies over food to feed your child? So we were very clear right from the beginning. We are non-referral. So anyone can come to us, whether you need us just as a one-off or whether you continually need that support. There's no limit to how long you can access our services. That was really important to us. And we don't take any personal information. We take postcodes because it supports our application for funding. So we can make sort of targeted applications for the area we serve. We work really hard to foster a supportive, welcoming environment where everybody is welcome. But we also do our very best to ensure everyone gets what they need. There's no kind of, well, you took that, so you can't take that. One of our biggest, highest demand items are nappies. Particularly larger, very expensive, particularly larger size nappies. So you're looking at young children, often school-age children, still in nappies for various reasons.
Yeah.
And the figures show us, we know that families with children with disabilities or special educational needs are experiencing kind of huge expenses around their child's needs, additional needs. So they are more likely to need our support.
Yeah.
So it's hard work. It is, and need for our services is growing all the time, unfortunately. But we are now an official charity. So we ran as a kind of community group for about 2.5, 3 years. I think maybe 3 years. So we're now a charity, and that has allowed us that kind of additional growth to meet the demand.
It's amazing. It really is. I mean, anyone listening, if you want to get involved, I'm sure you can find Lauren's details. But it is just such a wonderful community project that has grown into a charity. And it's really, the sky's the limit, right? I feel like the sky's the limit, as in if you get enough support, it can just keep growing. Yeah. Because like I said, when I came and I saw the queue, this queue's through the whole library all the way down the street. And these people, you just go, wow, I didn't know there was a need for it. Yeah. And that's what shocked me. And like I said, the thought just went to all these people with families. And like you said, you wouldn't know families need that help. And it might be that you're working and you can't quite make ends meet. Yeah. Because a lot of people who access things like this are working families. People always assume it's people who don't have jobs, but actually that's not the case now. Life is tougher.
No. In-work poverty is so rife and has been for a good few years now. So that is why we were quite clear. We are referral free. There is no limitation on whether you need to use us once because it's been a tough month, or you need that continual support. So there are limitations on what we can do because we are a small group of trustees. And we are very, very keen to be able to maintain the service we provide. We have a wonderful, wonderful group of volunteers who support us. We couldn't do it without them, but we are very careful to ensure that the environment within our sessions there has to be an element of equity there. We are a community space run by the community for the community. Our volunteers understand that this isn't a place where you come to absolve yourself of your middle class sins, and to help the needy. That is not what we're about. It's about the redistribution of resources, as it were.
And if people can get on board with that, it would be awesome.
It's so important that we understand as a community that poverty is not a personal failing. It's not. It's, without becoming too political, it's carefully designed and it's carefully maintained by certain structures in place, and it's designed to target certain groups. And by maintaining the belief that poverty is a personal failing, we are contributing to upholding that attitude. And when we actually look at ourselves in community with each other, understanding the benefits of seeing each other as whole human beings and offering what we can when we can, and that redistribution of resources becomes much easier to understand who benefits from maintaining these structures, the divide between us all.
So as a community, basically, if we can bridge our own divide, we can build a stronger community
Absolutely.
that goes beyond what has been set upon us.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like that's like a whole episode within itself.
Absolutely.
So on that note, thank you so much for your time, Lauren. And I really hope you'd come and join us again. We can maybe talk about something else and
would love
find
to.
something more exciting bits. Before you leave, if you could give just 3 tips to parents, basically about supporting your child through transition, allowing them to have their voice, and enjoying school, what would they be?
Like I said, around helping them develop their emotional literacy, validate their feelings, read to them, reading with them, reading to them, reading near them, developing that love of learning. Children learn to be readers on the laps of their parents or their caregivers. So setting a really good example, but also it's a real love of learning rather than a love of obedience and compliance, and helping your child develop a lifelong love of learning, a curiosity. Get them out in nature, get them asking questions, and try to be the parent you want to be and you believe you can be. And your child will see what authenticity looks like because they learn from us modelling for them. And that will allow them to be their most authentic selves when they enter the classroom.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Be your authentic self so your child can learn to be their authentic self. And on that, we will say thank you for listening and hope you join us next time. Thank you for joining us on today's episode, and we truly appreciate you listening. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, subscribe, and follow to stay updated on future episodes. We look forward to seeing you next week.